All right. Hello to all my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. It is me, Tad. This is just a Tad. A show where we basically just kind of talk about things and I do some artwork. And as you can see from my stream here, that's going live. Uh, we're going to be talking about a character who just kind of made his way into the live action setting of Star Wars, Grand Admiral Thrawn, who, for those of you who know me, you should know that like Grand Admiral Thrawn is without a doubt probably my favorite Star Wars character, like hands down. It's honestly it's yeah. There's no competition. So we're gonna get started on this, and this whole stream is basically just gonna be me drawing the character and just kind of gushing and talking about why he is, in my opinion, the best Star Wars character, hands down. And I know that's probably a bit. Some people might scream heresy at that because George Lucas actually didn't invent the character, but I mean, this is my opinion and this is my show, so take with that as you will. So let's get started here. So as you guys probably know, if you've seen the Ahsoka show, then you know that Grand Admiral Thrawn finally made his live action appearance, and honestly, it was epic. Like that entrance was legendary. Yeah, so what I'm doing right now is just kind of like blocking out the body, getting everything into position. I thought this was a very Thrawn pose, so I thought it made sense to kind of use that. So I don't need this anymore. And now let's get this body half here. Good place to probably start when it comes to Thrawn would be to discuss how I came across the character. Well, actually, no. Probably a good place to start would be to talk about Star Wars and why. Well, like I said, he's my personal favorite Star Wars character of all time. Like, if I had to rank all the Star Wars characters, nice little grunt shot there for you guys. If I had to rank all the Star Wars characters, I would probably say, like, if let's just say, my top five Star Wars characters, I would say, number five would probably be the clones. Okay, maybe I'm cheating there by having like all the clones be counted as one character, but they kind of are. I mean, that's kind of like what makes them interesting, right? Is that like they're all the same DNA. They all have the same. They all share the same connection to the same person, Jango Fett, but they all have like some differences too. Like some clones were supportive of the war, some clones hated the war. I remember the one episode of the Clone Wars where there was like a deserter. Okay, I'm getting off track here. I'm rambling. So yeah, number five would probably be the clones. Number four would be Darth Maul, specifically the Clone Wars version. The Phantom Menace was just kind of like a blank nobody. I think we got a good pose here. This is looking very Thrawn-esque. So yeah, number four would be Darth Maul. Number three would be Obi-Wan Kenobi, probably. And then number two would be Ahsoka Tano. So number one, obviously, when it comes to Star Wars characters, would be Grand Admiral Thrawn. Let's actually do the body first. The face is always the hardest. I've always heard of the character. I never really got into him or like, I never really saw the appeal until strangely enough, it was Rebels, Star Wars Rebels. I watched the show after the Clone Wars, the final season ended, and I was just kind of like needing a little bit of an animated Star Wars kick. And so I was like, yeah, I'll check out Rebels. And honestly, like, it's not a terrible show. In fact, I would actually say that like seasons 3 and 4 are really good. Um, but like season 1 is just not great. Not a great show. It took a while to find its footing, and honestly, it's kind of funny that like season 1 was so disappointing. I almost didn't even finish the show, and then everybody I knew told me that like, oh, it gets better, it gets better. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll stick with it for one another season. And season 2 was surprisingly a lot better. I didn't really care much about like any of the. Um, I didn't really care much about any of the stuff involving like the actual main characters, like Ezra Bridger, Hera Syndulla, all that stuff. But like the stuff with Ahsoka Tano and like Darth Vader in that show, awesome. Um, so really loved that. And then they also brought Darth Maul back, which was also really cool. So I was kind of like, yeah, I'll stick with this show a little bit longer. And thank God I did, because season 3, Thrawn makes his appearance, and I was very intrigued by him as a character. Um, I think what really made him interesting was that throughout the show, he never really loses, or he never really like thinks of a loss as a loss, because he loses a lot in that show. But like every time the Ghost Crew beats him or he loses a battle, he's always just kind of like calm and collected. He's just like, yeah, they won this battle, but like I'll get them next time. Or like they'll reveal that like that was the plan all along, and now he's learned something about them. I don't know, there was something really fascinating about like an enemy who like even when he loses, he still finds a way to like spin it in his favor and turn it into like a win. Or he never views a loss as a loss. He views a loss as like a learning opportunity. And I thought that's so interesting. You don't see that a lot in Star Wars. Um, and I thought that's really, really kind of cool. And honestly, like, yeah, Rebels was kind of like the first introduction to the character of Thrawn. And yeah, I'm thinking, how's this look? This is, yeah, that's looking all right. Maybe fix up the. I always thought these pants were like really goofy looking. Even like in the Ahsoka show when he shows up, I'm like, oh man, he's got the good goofy like pants with the puffy leg bottoms, and I don't know. But yeah, that was my first introduction to the character, was in Star Wars Rebels. And after that show ended, I was like, I want to learn more about this character. I'm really kind of curious about him, which very rarely happens with shows. Usually, I'm just like, okay, I've had my fill. Um, but no, when it came to Thrawn, I wanted more. I guess it's like the Kylo Ren meme, right? More, more. So yeah, I got my Thrawn taste from Rebels, and I wanted to see more of the character and learn more of the character. So I actually went and bought the canon novels by Timothy Zahn, all three of them. There's like Thrawn Alliances, and Thrawn Treason. And I read those novels, and those are what made me fall in love with the character. Timothy Zahn, I think because I've also went back and I read Heir to the Empire, and it's good. It's a good story. But I think canon Thrawn, new like the Thrawn from the Disney canon, is a lot more interesting as a character. In the Heir to the Empire, Thrawn is interesting, but he's kind of just your generic bad guy. He's a different flavor of bad guy, and I guess that's where a lot of people who like Thrawn as a character, that's where the appeal is. And I agree. Thrawn as a character is very different than the usual Star Wars antagonists that we get. Because usually, like, oh, it's like a dark side Force user, and that's kind of like the extent of the villains that we have in the franchise. Maybe the occasional bounty hunter. Thrawn, however, is a very different kind of bad guy. He doesn't have the Force. I wouldn't say he's like an exceptional fighter or like combatant. He's okay. Like he definitely knows his how to fight. I'm thinking, yeah, this is pretty good for a first draft here. Yeah, that's a good start. That's a good solid start. Okay. Um, Boy, where was I? I was talking about Thrawn. Oh, common artist mistake. Drawing on the wrong layer. Let's erase it and start again. I can merge this layer down. Get a new layer. Reduce the opacity of the next one, and just kind of like draw over and get everything in position. Um, what was I saying? Yeah, so the Thrawn novels really made me fall in love with the character. What makes Thrawn such a threat is his mind, and I really like characters that are like that. I like characters that are very brains over brawn, you know, because characters like Sherlock Holmes or Better Call Saul. That's another good example. Saul Goodman. I like characters like it. It's cool when you're watching a TV show and two characters go into a room and then like they fight and duke it out, and like the stronger character comes on top. That's cool. But it's a lot more interesting when two characters enter a room and one of them is already lost because the other character was like 10 steps ahead. I don't know. That's just one of those things that never will get old to me. And Thrawn is essentially that character. Like, he is always ahead of the game. He is unstoppable when it comes to his tactical knowledge and his ability to like predict enemies. And I don't know. I think that's very interesting. It's a very different kind of Star Wars villain. Um, yeah, there's something really interesting about a character who uses his brains to outwit his enemies. And Thrawn is also like doubly interesting because he's not so much like. So, when I was in film school, we learned about this thing called the Auteur theory, which is basically a film theory where you can learn something about the director by watching their movies and looking at certain patterns or recurring elements and stuff. Like, if you watch a Christopher Nolan movie, odds are he's going to deal with time in some way or another. So, from what I can gather, Christopher Nolan, that teaches me something about him as a person. You know, he's obviously very interested about time. It's something that he constantly comes to. Or, you know, a better example. Have you ever noticed that Tim Burton has a fascination with dead dogs? I mean, Nightmare Before Christmas, dead dog, it was a ghost. Corpse Bride, dead dog, it was a skeleton. Frankenweenie, the whole movie's about a dead dog. So you look at these recurring patterns in his work, and you can kind of like learn a little bit about him. Maybe he had a childhood puppy or a childhood pet, and he never really got over with the grief of losing that pet. You know, that's kind of what auteur theory is. It's about learning about the director through their common patterns in their work. And Thrawn essentially does that with art. That's kind of like what makes him so interesting. Is he will look at a species or a culture or even just another human being, an opponent, and he will look at their art and he will analyze it and he will detect patterns, and he'll be like, oh yes, you know, this species, they really like rigid lines, so they must like structure, and they must like order instead of like more chaotic elements, you know? And he uses that to defeat his enemies. And that in and of itself is really cool. I love that concept. Using art as like a weapon or a way to have a tactical advantage on somebody. That is one of those things that just like really made the character stand out for me when reading the books. Yeah, that'll do it. That's good. So let's put that in there. Make sure I'm drawing on the right layer this time. Okay. Yeah. So Thrawn is an art lover, and as an art lover myself, I relate to the character, and I think that's a very interesting approach to a villain. Somebody who uses an artist's work against them. And that's also one of the main complaints I had with Rebels, was that like they had the perfect foil for Thrawn in Sabine Wren. She's the artist, he's the art critic. And they never interacted in the show. Like, you think these two would be like perfect an antagonist protagonist relationship. But I don't know, for one reason or another, the show never went that route. So yeah, that was one of the main things that attracted me to Thrawn as a character, was his love of art, and how he was very dignified, you know. Probably one of if you really like the character, or if you watch the Ahsoka show and you think this is kind of interesting, and you have kind of the same experience I did when I watched Rebels, I would highly recommend picking up Timothy Zahn's novel. It's titled Thrawn. It's about his origin, rising through the Empire, and honestly, great read for a great book. Great introduction to the character. It starts with Thrawn joining the Empire, and you see him rise through the ranks. And another reason why I liked him was that wasn't very easy for him to do, because he's a Chiss. If the Empire was apparently not very friendly to aliens or anybody who wasn't human. They were kind of racist. But you know, and that Thrawn encountered a lot of that as he climbed through the ranks. one of the things I thought was very interesting from the books was that like Thrawn, it's very easy to consider Thrawn not a villain. So much so that like you see it on Twitter all the time, where like Thrawn is not a villain; he's more of like an anti-hero. I wouldn't make that argument. I would actually say that yeah, he's a villain. He works for a fascist dictatorship. Uh, I mean, would you say that like he basically works for space Nazis? But that's kind of what makes him an interesting character, is that like he's working for the bad guys, but he's not necessarily a bad guy. It's the Wreck It Ralph thing, you know, like you are a bad guy, but that does not mean you are a bad guy. Um, Thrawn, I would argue, is probably like one of the few Imperials who are not garbage, like human garbage. Like you look at like Tarkin, right? The guy was an absolute sociopath in pretty much every way. Like he was not a good dude. Look at the Emperor. That guy was 100%, you know, a monster in human clothing. Probably one of my favorite of the Thrawn books was Alliances. The whole book is just kind of like Thrawn and Darth Vader, and they're going on a mission together, and you see the difference between how these two characters operate. Um, People in the Empire actually like working for Thrawn, which I thought was very interesting. I'm going to reduce this a little bit. Yeah. People in the Empire liked working for Thrawn. Um, and for good reason. He's actually like a really good boss. People who worked in the Empire, if you worked on like Darth Vader's ship, there's a good chance he would just kill you just because he woke up grumpy in the morning. You know, like people were scared to work under Vader's leadership. Vader ruled by fear. Um, Thrawn, however, ruled through respect. He ruled. He was a leader, but he actually like appreciated other people's opinions. He valued his employees. He didn't just needlessly kill them. You know, yeah, people liked working for Thrawn under the Empire. And I always thought that was kind of like interesting. I like bad guys who are so likable that you have a hard time disliking them, you know? Like Doctor Doom is also like another bad guy that I really like. Cuz like he's a bad guy. Don't he's 100% a villain. But darn it all, you kind of got to admire how good he is at it. And Thrawn is like a bad guy, 100%. But darn it, he's such a good bad guy, and he's so good at getting results that you just like watching him. You like it's kind of like what I said when I mentioned that he's a very brains over bronze character. There's something really satisfying about watching a villain and a hero go at it, and the villain was already, or one of the characters, the battle was over before it even began. And that's like so entertaining to me. I love that kind of I love that kind of trope. I guess it would be, the battle was over before you even walked into the room. definitely the reason why I like Thrawn so much is he's a different flavor of Star Wars villains. He's a nice breath of fresh air, and that's also why like I'm super excited for his appearance in the Ahsoka show and the future of Star Wars going forward. I'm kind of super excited that Thrawn's going to have more of a focus because I've actually kind of like I kind of feel like Star Wars is starting to get a little stale. It's starting to follow kind of the same formula, and it's just they're not really doing anything new. There's been the occasional thing that comes out like Andor that was like a breath of fresh air and was very different and uh, kind of revitalized my interest a little bit. But on the whole, like, I don't know, Star Wars has just been like, other than The Mandalorian and the Ahsoka show, and I guess Andor, there hasn't really been anything that I've been like super excited about. And they keep announcing movies and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll check it out, but I don't know. It's just, it's, as a franchise, I'm kind of like losing interest. So when they announced that Thrawn was going to be like the villain, and then he's coming back, and the Dave Filoni's like Star Wars movie is going to be kind of a adaptation of Heir to the Empire, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like finally something different, and something. It'll be it'll be nice to not do like a light side dark side thing anymore and more focus on like rebels versus the empire, um, kind of bring that more to the focus, to center stage. Let's do I'm thinking we can make this chin, let's give him like even more prominent chin, and like let's really go wild with his head. Hmm, tuft of hair back there. Nah, that's not Thrawn. Thrawn isn't messy. He's very organized. Move the hair on the other side. How's that looking? A little too Tarkin like, isn't it? But I guess without the color, the kind of yeah, it's a little too similar. His hair doesn't do the curve thing like it did in the Rebel show. In the live action, it's kind of like, whoops, it's kind of just straight across. Maybe that would be better. There we go. This is looking a little bit better. It's not. No, it's got to be. I want to do something a little bit more stylized, like I'm a big fan of like animation, and the Gendy Tartakovsky Clone Wars actually, strangely enough, is like one of my biggest art influences. So you can probably see that in how I'm drawing. Um, I don't know. It's the hairline. I think there's something. See, this looks like this is Thrawn like, but it's not. You know what? Maybe it's the cocked eyebrow. It's not. Yeah. I think one of the things about Thrawn is that like he's very difficult to read, you know? He's not completely lacking emotion, but actually, you know what? It's not the eyebrows. I think it's the smile. Let's get the eyebrows back. Thin eyebrows. Actually, you know what? Maybe it'd just be better if it was just a line, like a thick line. That's looking, yeah, that's way better. And you know what? Let's get rid of the smile. Yeah, there we go. I just had to lay off the DreamWorks look, you know, like the DreamWorks always have the cocked eyebrow and the smile, like, yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm digging this. Yeah, yeah. All right, let's take my references away now, and let's just go one more. So the way I usually do art, I just kind of draw something and then I go over it and over it and over it and make little minor changes until I get to somewhere that I'm kind of happy with. So yeah, and then I add the final lines. So let's do one more. Um, yeah. So like, why is Thrawn my favorite character? Like I said, he's very brains over brawn. He's a very refreshing Star Wars villain. Um, he's very different from the usual Star Wars villains that we get, and you could even make the argument that he's not a villain. Uh, I would certainly not make that argument, but I know plenty of people who do. Um, yeah, I'm very curious to see what Dave Filoni does with the character and how he's going to incorporate him into the new Star Wars lore. Because I actually think Timothy Zahn's books have done a really good job at like bringing the character to the new Star Wars timeline while also like keeping the things that made him so interesting to begin with. Um, let's move this over a little bit actually. Yeah, definitely a big Thrawn fan. Like I said, I would say he's probably my favorite character, favorite Star Wars character, hands down. Um, he's just so interesting, and he's like he's not an asshole. I think that's what I like about him as like a villain is like he's just not a dick. Like all the other Star Wars villains, you know, they love to they revel in their meanness, you know. Um, especially characters like Darth Maul or the Emperor, right? Like they just love being evil, and that's fun. Don't get me wrong. Um, but I don't know. I just like Thrawn as like a character who's just he's on the bad side of history, but like he's not a bad person. And he has good motives like for what he does. Like for anybody who doesn't know, like Thrawn's whole thing is that like he's seen what the like what horrors the galaxy has. He's fought with an alien species called the Grisk, and the Grisk are like the Empire but worse. The Empire kind of like it desires order, it desires control. Whereas like the Grisk, they're more about like chaos. They're more about like destroying everything. They just kind of it's a yeah. The Grisk are the Empire would destroy a planet to control its people. The Grisk would just destroy its planet just because it's there, you know. Um, and what's scarier is that like they actually have like a lot of the power to do that kind of thing. So that's why like Thrawn joined the Empire was he figured, you know, probably these the Empire could be a potential ally to defeat these the Grisk, or you know, help him with it, help his people, I guess, because he's a Chiss, right? Um, so like I'm kind of curious to see how that'll work in the or if like Dave Filoni will even like address that in when he in future uses of the character. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what Dave Filoni does with the character, and no, like I said, like people, Thrawn in general is just such an interesting character to me. And Lars Mikkelsen is great as the character. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, I know a lot of people are jumping on the whole, like, oh my god, Thrawn is overweight. And, like, it doesn't. It honestly didn't bother me in the slightest. Like, yes, I thought about it when I first saw him. I'm like, oh, he's got a bit of a gut. But, like, the minute you hear Lars Mikkelsen talk, or the way he conducts himself, the way he stands, the way he delivers his speeches, it's Thrawn. Like, there's no there's no way you could find a better actor than that. Like, he's just so perfect in the role. He's very calm and collected, smart, always 3 steps ahead. Like, that's Thrawn. That's Thrawn to me. So yeah, I'm stoked for tonight's episode of Ahsoka. I can't wait. Curious to see. I mean, it's the second to last episode apparently. So if anything, that's my like only complaint with the show is that like I kind of wish we had gotten to Thrawn sooner. Like I loved the build up, and I think like his entrance was great, but it kind of would have been nice if like we had gotten that just a little bit sooner, you know, or like just I don't know. I just want more Thrawn. All right, we got our lines in here. Primary lines. Now I'm gonna do what I always do and thicken up some of the exterior lines, as I call them. You know, lines that are kind of give it like a bold outline, just to go with that animated look that I like so much. It'll be interesting to have like a Star Wars villain who you can't beat physically, right? Like it, you can't rely on like lightsaber fights or force powers or anything like that. Like with Thrawn, there's not really any way to beat him, like outsmart him the only way you can really do it is to like introduce something that he couldn't possibly have planned for. Um, Whatever that may be. I mean, it Ezra managed to. I would actually argue that like Ezra Miller didn't act, or Ezra Miller, not Ezra Miller, Ezra Bridger. I would actually argue that like Ezra Bridger didn't actually technically defeat Thrawn. I mean, he kind of did. Like the show is saying, "Oh yeah, this is like where Ezra Bridger defeated Thrawn," and it's like, yeah, but did he though? I mean, you didn't really beat Thrawn. You just kind of like took him out of play. You know, you just kind of you didn't defeat him. You just like moved him to a place where it's just like, okay, well now he can't play anymore. Is that technically a win? I don't know. I would argue that's not really a win, but maybe I'm wrong. And like now Thrawn's prepared. Like he knows that space whales are a thing, so that's not going to be able to be used against him. Hopefully, actually, like when they do, because like Thrawn's gonna fail. I mean, that's obvious. Like he even failed in like the Heir to the Empire books. But like I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of how he was defeated in the that series. I actually kind of feel like it was like it almost felt like Timothy Zahn wrote himself into a corner where he's just like, well, I've made this villain so unbeatable that like now that I have to write the conclusion, how do I do that? I'm digging that. I'm digging that a lot. All right. Now we can add the color. So let's see here. Thrawn has blue skin, which is kind of on this side of blue. Yeah, like that. So let's get some color in there. Yeah. This is like a gold. That's it. That's about right. Yeah, that should be fine. Mm, That's looking pretty good so far, I would think. Not too bad, not too shabby. Let's uh let's add some shadows and some highlights now. Although the opacity now matches the background, so I'm gonna have to lower it either just a bit more or just a bit higher. That should be fine. See, that's looking pretty good. Now to add the highlights, which usually I would do white, but let's actually go with like a really bright blue. That'll kind of make the Star Wars-ness of it all pop. So bright blue highlight. Whoop, be enough. Yeah, that's looking cool. Lower the opacity. Here's the other thing about Thrawn is that his eyes are kind of like glowing, right? So we should probably add that in as well. So let's add like a slight pinkish around the eyes. There we go. That's looking pretty good. One thing I am noticing though, let's just realizing that the gold probably should have a little bit of a shine to it. So let's go a little bit lighter. That's better. More of a diagonal. Even lighter still. Blur that as well. There. It's looking pretty good. Well, I can't think of anything more to add to them. Probably means I'm done. Uh, yeah. So, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you like this video or if you like my art. Follow me on Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, where I'll be doing some more streaming art lately and just kind of like talking to people. Yeah, so thank everybody for watching. Uh, May the force be with you.